All right, welcome to our little video on sprite control. This one's going to be good. It's going to use a good combination of ifs and variables and sprite commands. And we'll get our little Street Fighter doing a couple of nice linked animated actions. Okay, first to start, you'll notice I've wiped out all the actions for the player. We'll start fresh. First, I'm going to do an add event, create. I'm just going to create the first sprites that the player gets. So I'll say sprite index equals sprite standing, and let's set the speed. I think 0.2 is okay from before. Okay, and that's really it. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make some variables for the player. Now why I need variables for this one you're going to see in a bit, but I'm going to make this variable called state. What I'd like to do is I'd like to remember what the player is doing, because later on when the player hits keys to punch and kick and crouch, I want to be able to ask and know what the player is currently doing. For instance, if they're already in the middle of a kick, I don't want to let them punch and I don't want to let them crouch. I want to make them have to finish that kick off. And so the variable I'm going to use to do this is going to be state. And so you can choose whatever name you want or whatever numbers, but very typical, I'll say state 0 is just standing. And I'll do state 1 as a kick, and I'll do state 2 is a punch. Actually, let's make this a fire. Okay, so you'll see me using this throughout the code today. Okay, so that's it. Now, the player's just standing there. The next thing I want to do is we're going to try a kick. So let's go add event, key press. Now, what letters you want to use here, sort of up to you. I'll stick with K for kick. And probably not the best place to do a kick button, but you can decide where you want to put it. Now normally I had code that had this. Sprite index is sprite kicking. Set the speed. I'll keep the speed at 2. And remember that other one, image index. Make sure it goes back to 0 so we start playing that animation right from the first frame. Now when I do this, every time I hit K, it switches to kicking, frame 0. This is going to be a problem because I can just keep clicking K and it just keeps going and going. This is where state is going to come in. I'm going to ask a little question here first. I'm only going to allow them to kick if they're standing. And I know they're standing if the state is 0. So if the state is 0, then allow them to start the kick. I'm going to put the state to 1 to remember that I'm kicking. And that's it. Now if I run this time, what you should get, okay, is they'll be allowed to kick, but if you hammer the kick key, it's not going to be allowed to keep kicking. Because you'll notice here I've put the state to 1, but I've never turned it. Nothing you can do there, right? He's just kicking forever. Okay, state 1. What I have to do is I have to put the state back to 0. So let's go do that. Where's a good place to do that? Give you 3 seconds to guess where I'm going to go here. One possibility is in animation end. Okay, when the kicking animation ends, I want to go back to standing. So what I can ask here is, the animation just ended. I can ask questions. So I'm going to say, I'm going to get a little specific here, but I could say state goes back to 0, okay, which is standing. Now the nice thing is any action I do here, I'm always going back to standing. Near the end of the video, I'll actually come back here and make this a little more complicated, put a couple ifs, but this isn't bad. State goes to 0. Put the sprite to sprite standing. Set the image speed to whatever speed was appropriate. And go back to frame 1. So the way this will run is any animation that ends, it's going to do this again. Okay, which is okay for now, but again, we will come back and modify it a tiny bit. Let's give it a go. So I kick nicely, and when I keep pressing K, I don't get any weird kick. I can only kick when I'm in a standing position. So that's pretty good. That's our fireball. We'll use him later. Okay, so there's the kicking. What about the punching? Well, the punching, same sort of idea. So let's add event, key press, letter. Now I'm at K for kick. Seems like a weird letter, but I is right above the K. That could be a good one for punch. So I'll do letter I. And you know what? It's basically the same code as the kick. So I'll copy paste, save a bit of time, and it's the same idea. If I'm in a state which knows I'm standing, I'm going to start to, oh, you know what? I said I would be punch. So let's do the punch. Punch. Image speed 0.2, image 0, and state. I just want to check that I'm keeping my states right from what I set up at the beginning here. Oh, I said 2 would be firing. So you know what? Let's do firing. Firing's a little more exciting. So we'll consider this firing. And we'll change our sprite to firing. That way we actually get to see our, sprite fire. This way we actually get to see our fireball launching. Okay, so this should work okay. And remember, when the animation ends, it'll pop back to state 0 and go back to standing again. So now I've got I or K I can press. So there's my kick, and there's my fire. Now, of course, with my fire, it'd be nice for the fireball to actually launch out. This may look a little cheesy at the beginning here, but you may ask yourself, well, when's a good time to fire? Do you want to do it right when they press the I key or at the end of the animation? Personally, I think it looks better if it comes out right at the end of the animation. So I'm going to do animation end. I'm always going back to this state. But you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to ask a quick question. I know an animation has just ended. So I'm going to ask a quick question. I'm going to say, if the state was state 2, that was firing, I know the firing animation is just ending. Now I can create a fireball. So let's create x comma y comma object fireball. Frank speed, Frank direction. Let's make this a little bigger for you. And then we go on afterwards to turn the state back. So you can see here, this is just one way to do it, is when the animation ends, I can ask a quick question. Now I'll show you some other ways and other places you could have put this code later on as well. Okay, but hopefully this makes sense why this will work. Now when I give this a test, kick, good. Fireball, good. Now notice where the fireball is being made. It's being made at XY, which is right around there. Now I won't spend a lot of time trying to fix this, but I'd like it to be a little higher and a little more to the right. So I'll just take 1 minute here. So a little higher, I can minus a tiny bit off the X. And a little to the right, I can add a little bit. Hopefully this makes it a tiny bit closer to where it should come out, but that's something you just have to fiddle with on your own. Not quite right. Okay, I'll do one more here. There we go. Okay, I won't even check that one. We'll just trust that that one works. Okay, the next one. We have the punch. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to leave the punch up to you and the crouch up to you to try to add that into the program. So that'll be part of your next challenge that you do. So technically that's a little introduction how you can use these variables, like state, to keep track of what the player is doing. The nice thing about state as well is you have a way of knowing exactly what the player is doing. For instance, if the player were to get hit right now, you could ask questions like, hey, if the player's in state 0, he's standing, maybe he takes medium damage. But if you hit the player while he's in state 2 in the middle of firing, maybe you make him take double damage. That's sort of a big penalty he gets, right, for getting caught. So the states, definitely a nice thing to introduce into these kind of games where a character can be doing different things. States will actually be a focus, a little topic on its own later on in the course. Okay, so we'll let you check out the challenge, which will get you to do a little bit more on this. Good luck, and hopefully we don't have to see you in the solution video, but if we do, we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.